Welcome to the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast.
Every week, they talk about the Vancouver Canucks with a fair amount of nonsense thrown in.
Sure, they're never the first with the news, nor the best connected, and definitely more off the rails than on.
But they've been talking puck the longest, and that counts for something, right?
So strap in for the longest running, best mediocre Canucks Hockey Podcast.
It's C4 with Chris and Anna.
It's been a couple of weeks. We were last here 2 weeks ago. A lot has happened, Anna. I started cursing like a sailor. Pulling the curtain back here. Actually, before I pull the curtain back, let's close the curtain here. Anna, how are you doing?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, good. Now the curtain opens again. So I had actually dropped a message in C4 Discord, which if you're not a part of Discord, discord.io/C4 podcast, join the conversation there. But I had messaged Anna saying, hey, if I don't cool down by Sunday, I may be making my job harder come Monday. And what I do is we record on a Sunday night. I typically go and produce Monday morning, sometime during the day. And what I was getting at was that I was using some language that my daughter was chastising me.
Which, fair enough. And, to be clear, Chris, unlike me, is not the type of guy that, F's and Jeff's left, right, and center. So it takes a lot to get Chris to that place, and clearly Canada winning was that.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a clever phrase, what you just said. Canada winning wasn't the reason for the language, but Canada winning is what contributed to the emotion that drove some of the language. We'll probably talk about this at some point. But I wanted to take a moment, and this is another thing that I'd shared with you over the course of the last couple of weeks, is I was just hanging around the internet as I'm apt to do, and I came across a post on Reddit in the Canucks subreddit, r/Canucks, talking about podcasts. And I'm always interested because, when someone says, hey, got any podcast recommendations, all the mainstream ones get suggested, which is fine. If you want to go and listen to whomever, or, Halford and Brough, you missed them on the radio, they've got a podcast. I got no issues with that. Yeah. I would always sort of present this as I'm looking for the, homemade versions. I'm not trying to discredit, but a little bit different, the personal, genuine experience than as opposed to the mainstream stuff. But that said, every so often you'll start seeing people pop up, and the second longest running Canucks podcast, Pucks on Net, often gets brought up. Their legion exists on Reddit. Their listeners are all over Reddit. There's a couple others that come up from time to time. People will talk about Canucks conversation. They'll say, "Oh my goodness, I miss Faber." You get occasionally Canucks After Dark, which is interesting. I'm always interested by
friend
that.
of the show,
Clay Emo. And then, anyhow, on occasion, C4 gets suggested. And someone had mentioned, hey, listen to C4, and they actually listed, I think, 3 shows. And they had said C4 is one of them, and they talked about us being a little more progressive. And this was sort of the post. It was like, hey, I'm looking for some more progressive podcasts, which, let's be honest, not all of them are.
Yeah, I mean, hockey and progressive don't always go hand in hand. Yeah,
and that's, personally, I accept it. I was going to say there's nothing wrong with that, but it to me, it is a reality. I'm not going to deny that that's the case. And so they offered to say more about the shows that they'd recommended. And so I replied hey, maybe I'm a bit biased, but what do you like about C4? Now, I'm hoping, May as well stop lurking, the user who I had engaged with, understood that Light Force is me. And if you're listening, may I stop lurking, or may as well stop lurking. That's just, I'm sure you knew it was me, but in case you didn't, hello. And they shared, despite being very well connected to some higher ups within the organization, Chris relies more on historical knowledge about the team when providing some analysis. Definitely more interesting to hear about what exactly the economic situation was when the cause or Chris sold. It's helpful context regarding decision making. It's interesting, despite being very well connected to some higher ups.
I'm I would say we occasionally hear things through our connections rather than being very well connected.
Yeah, I mean, like I was thinking about that. Like, I could accept that was the case some time ago.
Yeah.
Like, I'm old. I mean, I've been recording this show now forever, and Francesco still follows me on Twitter.
Sure.
But I'm not on that anymore, so like I don't engage, nor would I ever slide into Francesco's DMs. The people that I knew that worked at the organization, they've moved on. Like one of them is in the C-suite for the Portland Trail Blazers. Another one's a CEO for a tech company. Like these are all people that I knew way back.
Yeah.
And I don't go to them to get info, nor did I actually ever use them for info. But again, it's pretty cool. And then additionally, he and Anna have some pretty empathic. Thank you. I'm having problems with the English language today. In human reactions to semi-political events like the BLM decisions taken during the bubble, the value of national truth and reconciliation, such as reminding us that the last residential school in Canada closed after the 94 Cup run. They're definitely a great demonstration that a hockey podcast doesn't have to just be hard analysis, news recaps, and broy shenanigans. And I honestly, reading that, was like, that is exactly what I want our show to be.
They get
about.
us, right? Like, that's definitely what we're aiming for, is to sort of provide that perspective that's beyond hockey and beyond just, like, game recaps and the power play and whatever it is. We talk about that, of course, but, there are bigger issues at play, and we do try and talk about that. I'm not sure if we ever said that out loud, the fact that the last residential schools closed after the 94 Cup run. But yeah, like that's true. It's 97.
We did, and we have.
But like that is worth saying over and over. It was 1997. And if you are a listener who does not come from Canada, North America, doesn't really know about residential schools, really, I urge you and encourage you to dig into that. And there's an Oscar-nominated documentary called Sugarcane that I can really urge you to watch as well.
So, thank you for, being a supporter. r/may as well stop lurking over there on Reddit. And for the rest of our listeners, I just sort of want to reinforce, it's like messages like that. It's where you go and you amplify what Anna and I talk about. You tell people about our show. That's why I podcast. I'm not looking to, become, the next, I don't know, whatever it is. I'm well past that stage in my life.
Neither of us are looking for careers in broadcasting here or like reporting. We just like talking about Canucks, and
anyone who is
stuff.
Like, there's a lot of, I'm going to say, young kids with hustle out there. And I count you as a young kid, Anna.
That's ridiculous, first of all. Especially with the young kids out there. Like one of the biggest podcasts is run by, 19-year-olds. But yeah, okay. Yeah.
But the point being is that the kids with the hustle, that's the space for them to get into. I never had that hustle. I just enjoyed talking hockey. And that's how C4 came to be. Clay and I started just talking and recording ourselves talking. We were already having these conversations. And then, when Matt joined and Adam joined and you joined, that's really what we've continued to do, is just a bunch of people who know each other, who have opinions, who like talking.
We definitely have opinions. And yeah, I'll take the compliment about having hustle. And I do think I do. I just...
No, I'm not saying you don't.
No.
That's why I say
I appreciate
you young with hustle.
But I feel like I'm hustling in creative spaces maybe more than hockey spaces, but enjoying what we do nonetheless.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're on Reddit and you see someone saying, "Hey, tell me more about a Canucks podcast," we'd be more than happy to have you, shoot a few notes to someone as to why you like our show. Hey, if there's things that you don't like, be honest. I'm not going to tell you that you can only post good stuff. We've got some people who've told us that there are things that they've had problems with. And, I'm able to look at it in a lens and say, yeah, we can do better. We can improve upon that. But Reddit, social media, review sites, wherever, you talk about us, and that just continues to reinforce why we are the best mediocre Canucks podcast out there. You know what else is best and mediocre all at the same time? The Vancouver Canucks. They've had a couple of games since the return from their 2-week vacation. Didn't go so hot. A lot of mediocre, but there were some bests. Just happened to be in the crease. We'll talk about that. The Four Nations face-off came and went. And Chris cursed like a sailor. And a couple contracts have been signed. We'll talk about that too. But before we do all of that, including talking about the Vancouver Canucks, let's rewind and kick things off with the Four Nations face-off. Did you watch the Four Nations face-off? Like, was it, hey, I'm going to tune in, I'm going to watch Canada playing, or I'm going to watch the games, or did you just have it on in the background, if at all, or did you find that, maybe you didn't start watching it, but you started watching it as it went on?
I'll be honest, I didn't watch even the whole championship game. Mainly, I would have done if I had a free evening. Unfortunately, I didn't, so I just was catching things in between. I was definitely following the storylines. I was definitely catching highlights and parts of games when I could. I was more in tune to the Four Nations face-off than I have been to any football international break in the last 10 years, but still, I wasn't, fully engaged as it would be for Canucks games. I feel like I should just give you space to spend a minute just hooting, hollering, all things Canadian, make some Canadian noises. I don't know. Sing "O Canada."
No, I'm not about to go and I'm not gonna sing the national anthem. So I think I made it very clear when we last spoke. I might turn it on. It wasn't for me something that I was invested in. Now, if anyone is out there, how could you not be invested in this? It's best on best. I like the quote unquote best on best idea. I would love to see some of the best players, play against other best players. That I like. And, you don't get that in an NHL All-Star game. In
No,
the same
it's definitely not
as you would
the same
get, more
energy.
Yeah, right. So I will admit I like watching the type of hockey, but the Four Nations face-off had a zero sort of historical context for me.
It's a bit odd. To me, it really showed how much everyone craves best on best hockey rather than being the best on best itself. Arguably the second best player, third best player in the league wasn't there.
Yeah. So, yeah. For anyone who didn't pay attention, Quinn Hughes did not make the trip.
But also...
He did make the trip, but then he unmade the trip, but ultimately didn't play.
And to be clear, I was simultaneously talking about Quinn Hughes and Leon Draisaitl there, so...
Oh, yes. The tournament sort of got off to a start. Canada...
a start.
Yeah, Canada played, Sweden, had to win it in overtime, came out hot-ish, but as a Canucks fan, you know that's never enough. Sweden found a way to get back into that game. The United States, they lit up Finland. It was close in the early going and not so close at the end. But again, it's I know this, but I really wasn't paying close attention. I was more invested in the fact that the BCLC had a prop bet for whether or not JT Miller and Elias Pettersson were going to have a fight.
That would have been entertaining, I'll be honest.
If you put money down on that, you would have lost that money. They also had a prop as to whether or not PD would draw a penalty against Miller, and I believe that did not occur either.
But that's a lot more likely.
Yeah. And so again, that I sort of kind of invested in. I didn't turn on the first Canada and United States game. It wasn't for me appointment viewing as much as it was for other people, but I eventually tuned in after I kept getting messages because I couldn't understand. There was 3 fights within 9 seconds. Which the Kachuk brothers and Miller all started, tossing.
And I did see Miller getting his lights punched out, which, I'll be honest, was enjoyable. Appealed to my basis instincts.
Yeah. So I turned it on after that only because what's going on? And in international hockey, you don't generally see this, but it was more NHL rules. So that fighting's kind of okay. US beat Canada. And it's well, I've seen this story before. I'm not suggesting that I'm oh my God, Canada's done for, but I've seen the United States beat Canada, and some questions about Canadian goaltending. Listeners of our show know that I'm not a big fan of Binnington.
Yeah, who is?
Yeah. But what really, I think, got me more invested was the continued geopolitical narrative that we're seeing, as I've sort of aptly described, from the Boeser down south. And when it became very much about politics, which, again, long-term listeners know, Anna and I, correct me if I'm wrong, politics are part of sport.
Mm-hmm. Have always
They
been.
exist. Yeah,
Like,
that's nothing new.
they literally open the game with anthems, so.
Right? Took hold. So, when Canada played the United States, the Canadian fans in Montreal booed the U.S. anthem. In fact, the Canadian fans booed the U.S. anthem when they played Finland, too, right?
Yeah.
And that's not because they're booing the team on the ice. They're booing the narrative that's being driven by the Boeser and the Boesers from down south.
Yeah.
And when that sort of narrative started to get fired up, it got me going. And I did tune in to the gold medal game between Canada and the United States. I did have some nervous squeaky bum times.
Yep.
And when Connor McDavid was left wide open in the slot to score that goal in overtime, I may have said some very bad words. I just bit my tongue because I almost repeated the words that I said.
Yeah, I mean, I literally, I managed to park my car and pull out my phone, turn on Sportsnet about 30 seconds before the goal in overtime. And I was just like, what are they doing? Connor McDavid, best player in the world. Almost inarguably best player in the world.
How he was so wide open.
So wide open. He had time to call for the puck, and then about 5 seconds later he shot the puck.
He had time to go and set up a tent and hang a hammock before he was likely going to need to shoot the puck.
Yeah. But if we're talking pure hockey, yes, Canada are a better team than the US overall. Yes, the US have much better goaltending, have had much better goaltending throughout the tournament until the championship game.
When Binnington, to his credit, did some phenomenal things, like when the Canadian team needed him to make a big save, Binnington was like, no, I'll make an even bigger save than that. And I this is Anna, this is how I feel, how conflicted I am. I was really enjoying the play of Binnington late in the game. I was happy with Marchand's effort, and by golly, I was celebrating a McDavid goal.
Yeah. See, I would say would be the benefit of not being Canadian, is that I had to do none of those things. But be pleased for Canada and Canadians at the end. I will say, this is kind of off the rails, but the sort of thing, the narrative around Binnington was so annoying, because the England cricket team do this a lot, where they have been kind of known over the last couple of years of making some insane picks for their team. And then this player struggles, and they struggle, and they struggle. And then they come good in one game, and they say, see, we were right. You guys were wrong, actually. And it's to be clear, Binnington was amazing. To be clear, he shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Yeah, I think what you've described is how I felt. I'm not the person Binnington's our starting goaltender for Canada in the Olympics.
He's not even the third best.
But I can't take away the fact that Binnington arguably is the reason Canada has a chance for McDavid to score that goal.
I mean, yeah, in that game, but who's to say?
In that little microcosm. Heck, Finland in the Canada-Finland game, they made a go at it and had that game gone to...
game.
Had that...
Canada-Sweden
Finland
game.
tied that game up.
Yeah.
And Canada had beat Finland, but albeit in overtime, Sweden beat the United States. Sweden would go through.
Yeah, right. I just think every other game he looked so subpar. But yeah, like, no doubt he was excellent in that game.
Anyhow, Canada won. I swore.
Yeah.
And my daughter chastised me.
Yeah. Like, politically, it was important.
And I did light up on a few people in a couple of communities that I'm part of online who were trying to make light of that political narrative. Trying to explain them, like, first of all, you're an American. Like, you can't tell me that's funny, because it's not.
Yeah.
Like, I'm telling you it's not funny. I'm being respectful, but without thinking, hey, why aren't the Canadian not finding it funny?
And there was that whole thing with the Bill Guerin interview on Fox that was massively misreported. Don't get me wrong, like, that it was so factually incorrect how it was reported. But to me, it doesn't make a difference. Bill Guerin was saying they're inspired by the booze. Where did the booze come from? They're not existing in a political vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
And then, too, like, how they wanted Trump to come to the end. Then when Trump called them, they were so excited.
I much prefer referring to him the hoser from down south.
Yeah, okay. But, like, literally, like, to me, it doesn't matter. I think the politics was crappy. Like, it doesn't make the US team look very good.
And hockey-wise, US team looks good.
Yeah.
Hockey-wise, the US team looks good. Everything else, couldn't stand it. Would prefer it not to have been a thing. I would have actually, honestly, much preferred have not been invested in this tournament whatsoever, and then heard, like, oh, they missed out some good hockey. Oh, that's my loss. I would have much preferred that. Yeah. Because then that would have meant the geopolitical narrative non-existent. Anyhow, a few other notes. Petey was hoped that he would refine his game.
Nope.
He did not. Game not found.
Yeah.
Now, there was an image of him looking to ice his knee. And then there was, he was a day-to-day, a game-time decision prior to the game against Vegas this weekend, where it had been reported that Petey had picked up an injury in the Four Nations Face-Off tournament. Now, whether or not there's truth to him picking up the injury there, it feels to me that that's the justification for the injury he may have had prior to. Right. But
I mean, it's so hard because literally Canucks nor Petey are really fully admitting to an ongoing injury. Like, we'll get into this fully later, but the point is he's struggling. Like, whatever the explanation, he's struggling. Yeah. And it didn't get any easier during the Four Nations.
Quinn Hughes did not play in the Four Nations face-off. There was some thought he might. He didn't. He did make the trip out. So it was reported that he was on his way to Boston, where the gold medal, the championship game was being held, which with the Four Nations face-off, the roster rules are really weird. Theodore got knocked out in the first game from Canada. They were able to, bring in a replacement.
But only because someone else, because Kel McCart was sick. Yeah. I mean, I did see someone say, who cares? It's a made-up tournament. Just let Quinn Hughes play it. And I was like, newsflash, sports is made up. Like, this whole thing is made up, but we have to have some rules.
Yeah. Kevin Langton looked good for Finland.
When he came back in, I think he was very good. And then kind of...
Last game?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
But then, things were things. But overall, like, were we expecting too much from Petey? Probably. Were we expecting too much of Quinn? Maybe, but hey, he didn't play, and maybe that's what we were all expecting and hoping for.
That was what I was hoping for.
Especially, actually, think about like the injuries that have been suffered by players who played in the tournament who are currently not back with their NHL teams. But that said, the Vancouver Canucks front office did take maybe a few hours off over the course of the 2 weeks before sitting down and signing some deals. The first deal that I think the first deal that was announced was the Lankinen deal, or was it the O'Connor deal?
I think Lankinen was first.
I can't remember now, but Lankinen was the bigger of the two. And this is no disrespect to Drew O'Connor. But the Vancouver Canucks announced that they've signed Kevin Lankinen for 5 years. Kicks off next year. This season, he's making less than $1 million. $875,000 as a goaltender who has arguably been the 1A and it very worse, the 1B.
Yeah.
Hell of a steal for less than $1 million. He's not making less than $1 million for those 5 years. He's going to be making an AAV of 4.5 over 5 years, or across those 5 years. First, I think it's the first 2 years is the no movement. The final 3 is the no trade with the 15-team list. But why this is big news is he is now going to be making pretty much Demko money. Deserved with a very, very small sample size. But you now have a Demko and a Lankinen making some serious bucks. What do you think this means for Demko?
I mean, it's not good. I don't remember if it was at the same time, but it was announced Demko was week to week.
Well, yeah, it came out really close, and
yeah,
I think Seeloffs had gotten called up, and people
knew that something was up. Sorry, I did check, and Drew O'Connor was 2 days before, but we'll get into that.
Drew.
Sorry. But Lankinen, big issue. So, yeah, of course, it's super worrying what it says about Demko. And I do hear concerns about the size of the sample size. The sample size is small.
It's essentially one season in a Vancouver Canucks uniform, and prior to this season, you know, he's played well, but has he played that type of contract well?
And we just don't know. But like, what position?
Paid that in the market.
That's the thing. I mean, everyone's talking about like how this was a goalie without contract, but like he could have had a contract before he signed with the Canucks. He held out because he thought he'd deserve better. It's kind of like, what choice do we have at this point? We've got a goalie who's performed really well when called upon, which was a lot more than he thought. Called upon much more frequently than he thought he would be. And performed very well. And you've got a starting goalie who was Vezina caliber less than 2 seasons ago. And has struggled with injury massively since then.
And for those of you who may have forgotten this, didn't complete his last start. He had to withdraw himself from his craft due to what was defined as a knock that shouldn't be too worrisome. But 2 weeks off, still not ready. Needs another week, right? Like,
it's not good.
There's something that you can take to the bank is when the Canucks say, "Hey, it's not that bad," they're lying.
Yeah, Canucks are good at that. Like, I don't... It's hard to see Demko having a long-term, consistent future with the team, as in starter-load future.
I agree with you. I feel that the Lankinen deal means that the Vancouver Canucks are looking to move on from Demko. Especially with the fact that, you know, the Lankinen deal with the 2-year NMC.
Yeah.
That second year is a UFA year for Demko. I don't think you bring Demko back under long term and you'll then move off of Lankinen for year 3. If it doesn't work out with Lankinen, you're going to go find another goaltender, whether it be Seeloffs who you already have or whomever it might be. Small sample size worries me, but then I think realistically, Lankinen probably gets what he got from the Canucks money-wise on the market. I don't know if he gets the term.
No, probably not.
Right? I could be that, you know, he is negotiating from a place of strength, knowing what's going on with Demko probably better than the rest of us.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. I'm not unhappy. I reserve judgment for a year or two down the road where I can say, boy, Chris should have been eating crow.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say the Canucks have covered all manner of sins with good goaltending, but Canucks can't build a legit contender without good goaltending. So if Demko's not healthy and Lankinen isn't doing it, we have bigger problems, right? So we're going to have to blow things up anyway.
Yeah. And Drew O'Connor, with the disrespect from us, many apologies. He was signed to a 2-year deal. Mr. O'Connor is going to get himself a big raise, going from his $925,000 contract up to a $2.5 million deal over 2 years. I don't think there's any protection as far as I'm aware.
Let me pull up his contract.
Without, the Cat Geek and all that jazz that used to be so awesome.
Well, I'm on
I know there's many
Puckpedia right now. I don't believe there's any protection here, so unless I am looking at the wrong thing.
Yeah. But we'll talk more about this in the half full, half empty segment. These contracts play into other players who are in search of contracts and or a future with the team. But the Canucks did have a couple of games upon the return from the Four Nations face-off. First game happened to be in Vegas. The Vancouver Canucks started Kevin Lankinen. Fresh off signing his deal, Lankinen played real good.
Real good.
Problem. Vancouver Canucks, not so much. And this is despite, DeBrusk getting the first goal of the game.
Yeah.
The Vancouver Canucks did not look good prior to the DeBrusk goal.
Nope.
They did not look good after the DeBrusk goal until late in the game. And by then it was, panic time.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
I mean, yes, Canucks had 2 disallowed goals, but, they created next to nothing. The shots were so low, and, Vegas weren't necessarily sparkling that much. They're a better team, obviously, overall than Utah, but, yeah, they were still there for the taking. Canucks were really not challenging them. And the defense was poor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, defense was poor, sure. Tyler Myers was
especially poor. Yes.
So the Vancouver Canucks had 2 too many men penalties. And both, I believe, involved Tyler Myers.
And Tyler Myers is 1.5 too many players.
I think, I don't know if it was the first one, second one. Tyler is going off. He is pointed to the bench. I'm coming off. His replacement jumps on the ice, and Tyler's like, nope, U-turn.
It seems very basic error.
I mean, it's not just him. This team and too many men on the ice. Penalties seem to work hand in hand. Tyler Myers fires the puck over the glass, gets himself a delay of game. And I hate the penalty, but it is what it is.
I mean, it still exists as a penalty, and NHL players are aware of this fact.
Yeah, I mean, was Tyler trying to do that? No, but he was careless trying to throw it up the boards. It just, thankfully, none of those power plays to Vegas, who I think is the number 2 special teams or power play in the NHL right now. They didn't score. So credit to the Vancouver Canucks in killing them off. But it sucks when you don't get your, offensive minded players on the ice all that much because you're too busy spending time down a player on the ice.
Yeah.
You mentioned not too many shots, and it's hard to get shots when you're shorthanded, right?
Literally, you might find this quite repetitive when we talk about the Utah game because...
Well, okay, but this is the thing. I mean, you got to give Vancouver Canucks credit. In the second and third period against Vegas, they did start shooting the puck, especially in the third period when, there was only a handful of minutes left in the game. The Vancouver Canucks got, I think, something like 30 some odd shots against Vegas.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like it, but that was because the first period was so... And even when the Canucks were getting shots, they weren't necessarily high-value opportunities. Now, Canucks ended up losing 3-1. Really, it was that early goal in the third period that did the team in.
Empty netter, blah, blah.
Yeah, it happens. So the Vancouver Canucks play back-to-back. They head into Utah to take on the hockey club.
Yeah.
Artur Silas, who'd been called up, he got the start. And again, what happens? The Vancouver Canucks in the first period have some troubles. Now, Utah, not as good as Vegas. Also, do not capitalize. But the Vancouver Canucks mustered 4 shots in the first period.
And once again, some dumb penalties.
All from defensemen. Like Tyler Myers, gets himself a nice early interference penalty.
Stupid.
Marcus Pettersson goes and gets himself
holding, which was holding, to be fair.
In his broken stick penalty.
Yeah, I mean, what can you do about that? That's just bad luck. But yeah, like spending your whole time on the PK doesn't make for good offensive opportunities. So,
yeah. But to Silas' credit, Silas was playing well. Like he, as a goaltender, making some good saves. I wouldn't say he was like lights out, but he was much improved from the earlier season Silas that we were seeing. He seemed more akin to what we got in the postseason.
Yeah, and I would say like he was not put in some good positions, quite a few breakaways. So I think he played pretty damn well.
Yeah, DeBrusk gets another goal to kick things off. Vancouver takes a 1-0 lead. This goal's on the power play, something that you don't actually see the Vancouver Canucks score on all that often. In the current edition has something to do with the fact they can't win a face-off if their life depended on it, and their zone entries still suck, especially in the world without Quinn Hughes. But the killer was that like a minute later, or maybe just over a minute later, Utah ties it up.
Mm-hmm.
And Vancouver continued to play like they had been. So that DeBrusk goal was one of 4 shots in the second. Like the Vancouver Canucks didn't break the double-digit barrier until like a third of the way through the third period.
Yeah. I mean, literally, we're going to repeat it. They weren't playing well before the DeBrusk goal. They didn't play well after. The difference is that the shot uptick never happened in the third.
Yeah. And, if you were to say, well, the reason Utah was getting shots and the Canucks weren't, it had to do with special teams. Not really. The Vancouver Canucks had ample opportunities on the power play. But when you don't win a face-off and your zone entries suck in a world without Quinn Hughes,
yeah,
short of firing the puck towards the net from just across center, there wasn't much else the Canucks could do.
I mean, literally, it just frustrated me. I just kept watching in the third period. They would just come down the wings. Utah clog up the wings. Canucks just go, I don't know what to do if I can't get in via the wings.
Yeah. Well, there was actually a moment with the net empty in the third period where Petey has the puck on the sideboards. And Utah is so confident in their ability to get that puck back, they send 3 players towards Petey to box him in, and not one Vancouver Canuck looks to give Petey
an option,
a relief valve.
Yeah.
And, Utah gets the puck, fires it down the ice. They ended up icing it. But the point is that, like, you can tell Petey's like, okay, I got to dish this to somewhere. But it was like you had 5 other players on the ice that had grown roots. It was nuts. The power play goal, though, that tip in by Dylan Guenther, that would have been nice if that uniform was more Canuck-like.
Yeah.
Well, the point being is that the Vancouver Canucks may have given the at the time Arizona Coyotes a draft pick that.
Oh, I see what you mean. Sorry. Yes. Very true. But I mean, yeah.
It was a beautiful goal. The tip in was
it was very well worked. But yeah, overall, it's just Utah are like the kind of team that can score maybe 1, maybe 2 goals on you a night. You just need to score 3. Which Canucks had ample opportunity to do. They didn't take it. It was just ponderous hockey. The fact that the most entertaining part of the game was the McIntyre eating ice cream in the background.
So yeah, the press box, if you don't know, is off in a corner with the fans, and yeah, the camera angle shows iMac behind was it Shorty and Dave Tomlinson, and he's just there full on, we're talking king size ice cream,
and just very studiously working his way through it.
Yeah.
But iMac
he was on camera.
He was a very good sport about it online after, so fair play to him.
So the Vancouver Canucks get no points out of 2 possible games this weekend.
Yeah.
They get a couple of nights off before they have another back-to-back, this time against the Kings and the Ducks. And then they head to Seattle for a game on a Saturday. So we've got 3 games before we record next, Anna. All 3 of them are on the road. You've got the Kings, the Ducks, the Kraken. What say you?
I mean, it's such a huge thing. Like, it's very clear that maybe the goalie thing doesn't matter. It's, can the Canucks get their scoring boots back on? Scoring skates? Scoring stick? I don't know. When does Quinn Hughes come back?
Mm-hmm.
Does PD's increased energy translate into anything concrete? Canucks got to win 1. They've definitely got to beat Anaheim, you'd think.
Okay. I give them a win against Anaheim too.
I think they lose against LA. And I'm going to be super positive here, and I think Canucks start to slowly turn the ship around, like in a really long turning circle. So I'm going to say 4 points.
Okay. I gave them 4. I feel they lose against LA. They beat the Ducks.
Yep.
And they beat the Kraken.
So we're in agreement.
And I want to qualify this. I could see the Canucks beating the Kings and then losing to the Ducks.
Yeah, and we just don't see
Because
both happening.
That seems to be the Canuck way, but realistically, the Kings are the better team. The Ducks are not.
Yeah. And
so,
yeah, Canucks could probably beat Anaheim without Quinn Hughes. Maybe.
Maybe. There was a comment from Luke on Blue Sky. It's like, talk at hockey is boring. And
I saw that.
It is so boring. It is. It's
a lot less boring when you're winning, though, Chris, isn't it?
No, I agree. But I will be the first one, and I have always said this, and I get chastised when I'm like, I'd rather see an exciting team lose 9-8 than a boring team win 1-0. And I remember back in the day, Matt was like, it's so dumb. But what I'm trying to articulate was that I feel an exciting team is likely going to win more than they're going to lose. A boring team, you notice those losses.
Oh, yeah. And I know what you mean completely. But, Saturday I had Arsenal lose to West Ham. It literally finished just in time for me to switch over to the cricket to see England lose. And everyone talked about what a good game the England versus Australia game was. What a good spectacle it was, because England should have won. Australia have a much weakened team. They look like they were going to lose. One special innings changes it. I'd much rather have the boring win, without the exciting part. But I also take your point, way Canucks played, especially at the back end of last season into playoffs, that was an exciting team. And you just banked on them scoring more often.
Mm-hmm. They're not scoring at all.
And
you know what? It's not the not scoring part. I mean, that irritates me. They're not taking shots.
Yeah, exactly.
The fact that the running joke is that, Hedl coming to Vancouver, he looked like he was playing aggressively. There were some flashes of him tonight where he's, playing east-west and north-south hockey.
All directions.
Right? And it's like, wow, we haven't seen a lot of that. Want to see more of that. And the running joke is that he hasn't quite figured out Tocchet's system yet.
Yeah.
He doesn't reward players like that. So anyhow, 4 points. You heard it here first, I'm sure, because no other Canucks podcast is being as positive as we are. You're listening to the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Anna and Chris.
Take hitting out of the game. You can't hit anymore, so don't do it.
The unsportsmanlike conduct, I want to get an explanation on that.
No kidding.
Because how do you get suspended for unsportsmanlike conduct?
Plus interference. There's no interference there. He had the puck.
Now, Madison never ever did that before. Now, why did he do it? Because he was mad.
Well, your early favorite for the Calder Trophy, that's for sure. Elias Pettersson, you might even say your early favorite for the Hart Trophy.
Just to get back to your question, Elias is going to play plenty. He's going to get a lot of power play time. And, I'm concerned about our offense. We lost 200-point players, and we've got to find a way to score.
Brock Boeser's got to wonder at this point if the Vancouver Canucks signing these deals, with Drew O'Connor and Lankinen and Marcus Pettersson, that he'll get his due, right? Like, the fact that the Vancouver Canucks continue to say they're evaluating Brock.
I mean, they're not, right? Like, they've made up their mind pretty much, it seems like, on Brock Boeser.
Is this a matter of just the team knows they can't compete with what he'll get on the market and aren't willing to even try? Like, do you think that's what it is? Like, and I ask this because what if we heard about Nikita Zadorov is that the Canucks apparently were giving him the numbers he got out of Boston.
Yeah.
And all along, prior to this coming up more recently, the thought was that the Vancouver Canucks could compete. Like when he signed with Boston, I think you and I both said, well,
yeah,
there's no way the Vancouver Canucks could do that. Right? Too rich. And yet here the Canucks were apparently offering that. So with Brock,
it does seem to be that
not?
They're still meeting, right? Like they had a meeting during the Four Nations and they're still very far apart. And I get it from both sides, but like, I can understand the Canucks' hesitancy because what has he really shown them to make them want to invest, like, in the long term and upping their price? Like, to me, it seems like it's not quite the same as a Tyler Myers, Brandon Sutter situation where, they take a quote-unquote hometown discount because...
Well, I don't think Boeser takes a hometown
100%
discount.
not.
The Vancouver Canucks have done him dirty a handful of times.
Yeah.
Like
and
any
some of that's the previous
gone.
Previous management, some of that's the current. But yes, I 100% agree. But I don't really see why the Canucks would necessarily go about things like differently. They can't offer him a huge raise or huge term. Like, what's he done to show them that he's worth that? And I like Brock Boeser a lot as a person and intermittently as a player, but consistent he has not been.
Yeah, I'm curious what number Brock is looking for.
Yeah, me too.
Like, right? It can't be PD money,
of course.
Right? And I'm not trying to suggest at this point PD's worth PD money.
No,
right? Like that. Anyone can see that PD is not making PD money right now, or he's making PD money, he's just not playing at PD money.
Yeah.
And when you think of a player like, Quinn Hughes, who best bargain basement deal the Vancouver Canucks could have ever gotten at 7.85, Boeser is probably looking for more than that. So what is that number that he's wanting? Like, do you think it's between, is it truly between 11 and 8? Like, is he looking for, let's say, 9.5? Because in my mind, 9.5 isn't a horrible bump. Like, he's making 6.6 something right now. But I'm not suggesting term I'm down with. And that's not a knock against Brock. It's just injuries have done him slight disservice.
Okay, yeah. I just mean among the active forwards, uninjured forwards right now, you've got PD that's earning almost double. But everyone else...
Asterisk beside the uninjured.
Yeah. Like, and is he earning that? Like, no.
Oh, no.
Arguably not, right?
Yeah. And if I get, there are some people out there who are just besides themselves that PD is still a Canuck and JT Miller is not. And they're taking every opportunity to trash the player. I don't disagree that his production ain't there, but as a Canucks fan, I want to be optimistic that if he is going to be a Canuck, he finds his game, because the Canucks are better with him and his game that we know he can play. But if maybe this sort of goes into the PD conversation, there's still some thought that the Canucks could move PD, though the latest is that they've pulled him from the market to see what they've got.
The thing is,
let's trade PD. Do you think they sign Brock? Because if they trade PD and they don't sign Brock, or they lose Brock, or they trade Brock,
I think
I don't know what this team does.
Yeah, like 100%, it has to be a joint decision. Like, what does the future look like holistically? Does that include PD? Does that include Brock? The thing is, like, Petey, we have talked about endlessly. He is not living up to his contract. This very new contract, but still, like, we're in February here, late February, and he's not living up to it. The problem is, I think the best plan of action is still wait and see.
Mm-hmm.
Because what are you going to get from him on the market at this point? A potentially injured, or at least ongoing issue with his body player who's way overpaid. Like,
well,
I think
the thing about Petey, though,
yes,
because you say wait and see, it's a whole lot of wait after.
100%. But the thing is, it's just like, he, at his best, he will be such a bargain in a couple years with his contract. The thing is, does he get back there? We just don't know.
Yeah.
It's just like looking at the alternatives. I'm not trying to be this relentless PD cheerleader at all. I'm realistic about the way he's played. We've seen flashes of brilliance, but
I don't know.
I
worry
think
that
it's the best course of action is wait it out.
Yeah, I worry that the Vancouver Canucks, and this has been a Canucks fan for as long as I have been, Vancouver Canucks never get breaks. If the things can go wrong with the Canucks, they go wrong. It's just the way it is. And I could see a future where they trade Petey, who ultimately is going to get discount returns. His contract is what it is, and his play is what it is, and it doesn't, translate into great return. They lose Boeser for nothing.
Yeah.
I could see them not dealing him and ultimately lose him for nothing. And then what do you have? You've got Quinn Hughes, who's a free agent in just a handful of seasons. And while you have a crap ton of cap space to spend, you're not replacing Petey and Brock, and in turn shoring up the team in a way that I feel makes Quinn want to stay here long term. Like you and I have talked about this. I think the new world is whatever you can do to make Quinn Hughes happy. He is the one true Canuck.
Yep.
Which is interesting because, like, only just that last season, our untouchables list was much bigger than Quinn Hughes.
And, like, it kind of
previous
centered on Petey or Demko. Like,
right. Two players who, like, I feel of Demko, Boeser, Petey. Demko, I feel, is the one who the Canucks have moved on. That Lankinen deal is
interesting. I think Bess is the least likely to stay.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not suggesting Boeser's likely to stay, but I feel Demko, like, I see there being a chance for Boeser. I don't see there being a chance for Demko.
Fair. I don't think.
Slim chance.
Yeah. I don't think either of them are future in Canucks long-term future. Yeah. And I do think PD is, just because him working it out and being anywhere close to his best is just so far the best solution, right? Like, like,
we saw
if he gets anywhere close to it, it's such a good contract.
Offensive game tonight. Granted, fires the puck high and wide on a breakaway,
but, like,
not so good. But you could see that he had found sort of the offensive confidence, and his reaction when the shot went high and wide, you can clearly tell Petey's taking that personal. Not a good thing. But the fact that he's reacting the way he is, I feel he's now really embracing the pressure of, hey, I'm here, I need to produce.
Yeah. And, like, I would say he's
given an F.
Yes, he's like, that's another thing too.
Not vocalizing them.
Well, I mean, I think there might have been one on the bench tonight when he slammed the gate shut. He was pretty mad.
We didn't hear it.
No. That's another thing too. I would say, like, I'm not trying to give him excuses. What I am saying is it's been an emotionally tumultuous season. I'm not saying he should, like, oh, it's fine that he's playing this way. No, it's still not. But that gives me hope that that's not necessarily something you just move on from. It's a whole lot of pressure on him now, and don't get me wrong, he has to live up to it. He really does, but I haven't given up hope at all that he's going to get there.
Is it wrong that I'm sort of thinking at this stage, even though the Vancouver Canucks are in a wild card position, I think they can get things sorted out for next season? I'm not trying to suggest that we're already at that stage, and I'm not guaranteeing that that actually occurs. And maybe that's just me being optimistic, which doesn't really feel right in the first place with me.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird because also, too, that just is such a reflection of the Western Conference, I think. The fact that Canucks have blown hot and cold as they have, and so much cold, and still are probably going to make the playoffs.
I don't know.
But, like, they're there or thereabouts.
Yeah. Probably just feels a little more optimistic.
Okay, sure. But, you know, like, they're very much still in the conversation.
Yes. Wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. Oh, man. Well, we'll be back next week to see if our 4 out of possible 6 points was a thing. Are we going to still be an optimistic podcast? Who knows? We, go with the way the wind blows. And it was blowing today. But we've reached that point of the show where I like to talk all sorts about some of the stuff that you can do to support us. First and foremost, one of the best ways to support us is obviously telling everyone about it. We talked about it at the start of the show. The more people that tune in, the more diverse voices that engage in C4 Discord, the more our podcast community grows. All good things. But one of the cool things about our podcast community is that they choose to support us financially. And one of the best ways to do that is to go to buymeacoffee.com/C4podcast. We know it's called Buy Me a Coffee, but Anna and I like to call it
Buy Me a Pint.
And you can contribute some money our way to actually buy us a pint or 2 or 3 or 5. Your choice is a one-off thing. But if you choose to support us monthly it's $5 a month, or annually, $50 for the entire year. You not only help us pay for the bills that we incur to record the podcast, host it, and publish it. It helps, us also improve our production. Our intro was based on our BMX supporters. But you also get access to C4 Off the Rails. C4 OTR is a approximately 15-minute episode that Anna and I record every week. It's exclusive to only those who support the show financially on a monthly or annual basis. We talk about all sorts. Very little hockey. Very much everything else. Last time I was giving Anna some grief over her musical tastes.
Oh yeah.
Or no, two times ago. Last time was 2024, which still seems kind of, we essentially reviewed like 8 of the, maybe 9 of the 12 months. And then we just decided that the year had ended and we weren't going to continue forward. But yeah, I mean, we talk about all sorts of things. But Anna, any kind of final words of wisdom?
This is going to seem random, but given how miserable the game was, I got slightly fixated on the Ian McIntyre eating his ice cream because I thought it was just adorable and funny and lovely. And special shout out to friend of the show, patron of the show, Sean Smith, because there's a cricket podcast we both listen to. And when they do daily recaps, they sort of shout out a Hall of Fame moment. And that's just a weird or kooky moment. And iMac eating his ice cream was definitely a Hall of Fame moment. And if Canucks have terrible games, boring games, just look for the weird, kooky moment and that'll keep you going.
My final words of wisdom, the hoser down south can go f*** himself.
There we go.
So on behalf of Anna, A4603, myself, Chris at Lightforce, signing off this episode with We Out.